I guess I have a problem with taking out good cards in Sapphire and Steel decks. And in today's video, I will be showcasing another Sapphire and Steel deck profile, but I took out another good card, and that card is going to be A Whole New World. So the reason why I wanted to make this deck list is because recently, still trying to learn the meta and testing with my friends, I found that in a lot of different situations, I didn't need to use A Whole New World or I didn't want to. I do have my Dreamborn link down below if you want to look at all my different variations of Sapphire and Steel decks. The deck list will be right here if you want to look at it, but I will be going over into very detailed explanations on all my card choices. And again, Sapphire and Steel just able to adapt to very different situations, which is why I really do enjoy love playing the deck. All right, to start off the deck, we're playing 3 Captain Hook and 4 Smee. I'm playing this package because fighting the board early on is super strong. I think this combo is pretty standard in all Sapphire and Steel decks. Captain Hook is really good to counter Daisy Duck, but overall, this package is just super good to counter any early game aggro from your opponent. And stopping lore is super important because this deck does take a few turns to set up, and you don't want to fall behind in lore. And overall, I think this package works really well against Ruby Sapphire to get that early lore. And then again, to counter Ruby Amethyst for their characters that they play early on. Contesting the board is just super important, and these two cards are the best way to go about it. To follow up with that, we're playing 4 Tipo. Again, Tipo I think is the best card that Sapphire Steel got this set. Being able to ramp on turn 2 is super important, and the fact that this card is inkable just makes it super explosive to create turns the following turn. Being able to play Hiram to draw 2 cards or use cards like Along Came Zeus, or even playing other strong 4 drop characters is just super cracked pretty much. Again, this card being inkable, I don't see why I would ever play One Jump Ahead or Detective Mickey. But so far in testing, again, Tipo is super strong. And a lot of people think that it's awkward having to play Smee and Tipo and deciding which one you can play. Honestly, just because Tipo is a 2 drop character doesn't mean you have to play him on turn 2. You can always play him on turn 3, and then the following turn bring out a character or play an action card that costs 5 ink. We're only playing 2 Pete because in New World lists, you can always ink him early and draw him later in the game when you're refilling your hand. But in this deck, since we're not playing A Whole New World, having 2 Pete is fine since you can mulligan him and you'll just see him later on in the game when you need him. Again, I think Pete is just a super strong card, probably the best card overall that came out in set 5. Super strong to counter the mirror match and Amber Steel as well. Amber Steel was a deck that Sapphire Steel did lose a lot more on the draw, and I think this card really balances it out. And since Amber Steel is going to be or has been a deck that's been on the rise this current meta and also in testing, playing P at the right time is super important. You're not playing this card on turn 3 unless you have to, which sometimes you can, just in case you see your opponent play cards like Ariel or you know they have an action they're going to play the following turn. But for the most part, you're playing P later on in the game, and it's all about timing. So when you can time a P on your opponent and lock them out of removing anything on your board, you pretty much win the game. To stop cards like Be Prepared, Grab Your Swords is just super strong. And this card at 2 fits in this list. I don't really see a reason to play 4. Maybe 3 if a lot of decks are playing action cards, but I think 2 is fine just because, again, we will see the card later in the game. For Cogsworth. Cogsworth, pretty standard card in, again, all Sapphire and Steel decks. Super strong against any Steel deck. So Amber Steel, again, being a very popular deck, Cogsworth is super strong. Being able to give resist to your board, again, in a fast meta where you're fighting the board and your characters get to live when they challenge other characters is super strong. I don't see any reason to drop Cogsworth. 2 Beast, aka Sad Beast. This card is super strong in this deck because since we're not playing A Whole New World, we need to keep drawing cards. And Beast requires an answer. If he does not get answered, he will draw you 1 to 3, 5 cards. Worst case scenario, when you play him on ramp, he will at least draw you 2 cards. If you're on the draw, Hopefully he draws you 2 cards, but if he does get answered, at least that 1 card is still beneficial. If they don't answer the card, especially late game, you're gonna out resource your opponent. And again, since we're not playing Whole New World, I feel like this card is a mandatory add-in. You can play 3 if you want, but since we're playing other cards that we'll get to, I think 2 is fine. We're playing 1 Donald Duck. I think this card fits really well into this deck just because we're playing a few 7 cost characters. And you don't always see Fishbone early or Tipo. You might miss them on the draw. And if you already have an early board presence, this card on curve allows you to catch up and not fall behind and get you that ramp and play a powerful character. You could replace it with a third beast if you wanted to, or try out more of these. But I think for 1 is fine. And I always wanted a third ramp card, or at least a 9th card that allows us to ramp in the deck. And the fact that it's inkable, and again, you can play it on curve, is super strong, and I wanted to try it out. And so far in testing, it's worked. And then to follow up, we have 4 Tinkerbells. Tinkerbell is still a very strong card. It just controls the board when it comes out on the field. It's just a standard 4 of in every Sapphire and Steel deck. And until a better card comes out that replaces it, I feel like this card is just not going away. Playing 2 Aerials. Aerials is going to combo really well with Lucky Dime in our deck. And Lucky Dime, Aerial, or just Aerial in general closes out the game really fast. Super strong against decks like Ruby Amethyst or Sapphire and Ruby, just because of her ward and being able to gain 5 lore. Just super strong. Plays really well on curve as well. So the reason why this list, or this deck in particular, plays more 7-drop characters is because since we're not playing a Whole New World, we want to have explosive turns late game, and 7 cost characters are the cards to do that. So to start off, we have 2 Hades. I think this card just fits really well into this list since we're not playing a Whole New World, and playing on curve in this deck is just super important, and a 7-drop character that can remove any character on board is just super strong. 2 Simba. Simba is not usually played in, or is not played in New World lists, but in lists without a Whole New World, he is really good because, again, how this deck needs to draw cards. Late game, drawing him and being able to draw 2 cards and filter out 2 dead cards is super strong. He's a big body with 5 attack and 7 defense. And again, on curve, just a super strong card to play. And his second effect, being able to deal 2 damage to something, is pretty much like another Tinkerbell. He can fight the board really well. And if you're ramping on curve with Tipo, Fishbone, Donald Duck, he's coming out pretty early in the game, and he can fight the board if need be. But the main reason why we play him is just because, again, drawing 2 cards is super strong, and we get to get rid of any uninkable or dead cards that we have in the late game. To finish off the 7 character package is going to be 1 Arthur. I think Arthur is a mandatory card just for the mirror match alone, or to kill characters with ward, for example Ariel. This card lets pretty much any card in your deck that's not Hiram or Tipo swing over for 4 or 5 in attack over anything. If you combo Arthur and Simba's attacking something for 7 and then dealing 2 damage to something else if he did destroy a character. Or with Tinkerbell swinging for 6, and again Tinkerbell can activate her effect and deal 2 damage to something. This card also works really well to counter Pete, so if you do need to remove something on the board, these 3 cards here against Pete will help you answer the board. Your opponent might think, oh, well, he can't activate action cards, he's going to lose. No, these cards are going to be your anti-Pete package, and they can pretty much help you survive that turn. Again, the 7 cost characters work really well since this deck is playing on curve and you want to do something explosive every turn. You can mess around with the ratios, but personally I have liked this package so far. And if you wanted to play Tamatoa, you could. You can swap out any of these cards and test it. To start off with our removal package, we're playing 3 Fire the Cannons. I think Fire the Cannons is super strong this meta, being able to stop shift lines or anything that costs 1 or 2 ink and has that 2 defense stat. Being able to answer it is super strong to stop your opponent from gaining lore and just to fight the board as well. We're playing 4 along Then Came Zeus. This card is just super strong since we do play Tipo and you can bring out Hiram the following turn and play Along Came Then Zeus as well. So either of those two cards being able to play on turn 3 is super solid. And again, your characters can sing this card as well. So dealing 5 damage to something is super strong in this meta, since a lot of characters, at least at least low cost characters, have 4 defense stats. And this card being able to deal 5 damage can pretty much kill anything. Also, that's a 5 or 6 cost character, for example, Tinkerbell or Beast, even like cards like Sisu and Maleficent Dragon. So overall, this card is just super solid, and being able to sing it is super strong. We're playing 3 Grab Your Swords. Grab Your Swords, pretty standard. There's not a card that's better than this, and if there was, I'd be playing it. If it was inkable, that'd be even better. But this card, just like Tinkerbell, is not going anywhere, and it's still really good in this meta, being able to board wipe your opponent and deal 3 damage to something if you're pairing it with Tinkerbell. But overall, this card is just super solid, and it's not leaving the deck. To finish off our removal, we're playing 2 Hideaway. So we're not playing Cusco. I think Cusco is a bad card in this deck because I don't want to play Cusco on curve. I'd rather control the board or have cards on board that are allowing me to draw. I think this card's super strong in the early, mid, and late game just because it costs 2 ink. Sending the location or item that you're banishing to your opponent's inkwell does feel pretty bad, but if you're playing it again past the mid game, it doesn't really matter. When you're using this card against Ruby Sapphire and you're banishing your opponent's lucky dime, or even in the mirror match to their inkwell, and they can recur it with Tamatoa, that's super solid, since you have other characters that can get rid of locations like Captain Hook, Smee, and if you're fighting the board, you don't need to run more than 2. But if you want to run 3, just in case the meta turns to heavy locations, I'd be okay with that. To finish off our action cards, we're playing 2 Vision of the Future. I love this card so much, especially in this deck. I mean, I even play it in my whole new world list, but this deck, it works really well because how you want to be able to draw cards, or at least find cards that can draw you cards, this does that. In the late game, in my testing, I found that when I do run out of gas, when I top deck this card, I'm able to find the Hiram that I need, or the lucky dime. If I'm in a bad spot, you can find Grab Your Swords, a Tinkerbell. If you're in the mirror match, you can dig for that Cogsworth. Against Amber Steel, you can find Pete. I mean, there's just so many different scenarios where this card works really well. I think you'd be crazy not to play this card. Again, it doesn't do the same role as drawing you cards, but it's what the deck I felt needed when you're behind or when you're running out of gas, and this card will just help you seal the game off. Especially to help find your dime, it's just super crucial. To finish off the deck, you have the Hiram package, which is going to be 4 Hiram, 4 Fortisphere, 4 Popsicles. This is just the best engine in the game, probably allowing you to draw 2 cards, filter your hand. This package is just insane. No reason to cut it. It's going to be in every Sapphire and Steel deck, probably in every meta until something replaces it. To finish off the deck, we're going to play pretty much the 6 standard items that every Sapphire and Steel deck plays, which is going to be 4 Fishbone Quill and 2 Lucky Dimes.